lovely to see you.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. It's really wonderful to see you too.
Well, thank you for joining me. I mean, Lindie, let me just say, every time I see your name anywhere on the internet, whether it's on Facebook, on Instagram, or on Twitter, or YouTube, or pretty much wherever you're mentioned, it's just this flurry of, we love Lindie. And it really is. It's so overwhelmingly positive. And there are so many people who just absolutely adore you out there. And I'm not saying this just to sort of flatter you for flattering's sake. It's just really, really nice to see. And when I see that, it makes me very happy too. So can I just say on behalf of everyone, thank you for being you.
Richard, that's very sweet. Thank you so much. That's very encouraging, you know, in times where like online abuse and online hate is so prolific. It's just so heartwarming to know not that I as a person am appreciated, but that there is such like a warm spirit in the online language community. And likewise, I can say exactly the same for you. Like when I see your name on Twitter, it's like, man, Richard is just the coolest person. So thank you for saying that. And I also just want to say I see so many familiar names here in the chat, and someone said they woke up at 2 a.m. So I just also want to say hello and thank you so much, everyone. You guys are just the coolest.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love that people got up early for this. And I've seen emails this morning as well, and it's so nice. So welcome, everyone. And first of all, very happy International Day of Multilingualism to everyone. Yay. And we're here today with Lindie because, well, you're as multilingual as it gets, really, aren't you? And it felt like the right kind of person to talk to, because I think for you, multilingualism, what does that mean? What does a multilingual Lindie mean?
Goodness, I was just thinking about that earlier, that some kind of like a fun game that my dad and I like to play sometimes is we imagine what would our family be like without languages, or what would a monolingual Lindie look like. Now, that's not from the perspective of monolingualism is bad. It's just that languages have changed and added to my life so much that I would be a completely different person if it weren't for languages. So what does multilingualism mean to me? I think it's at the core, it's connection. Languages connect people. Even if you just speak one language, you have a means of connecting with people. And I was actually just in the taxi on the way home speaking to a Cantonese taxi driver, and he was telling me, you know, about his experiences. And he said there are two things that connect people: food and languages. And when you have good food, what do you need to do? You need to talk about the food. How do you talk about it? Through language. So at the core, multilingualism, or even just languages, it means connection for me.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, and I think it's nice that you have that kind of conversation at home. I mean, because our origins are slightly different as well, aren't they? Right? I mean, I grew up in a monolingual environment, and even though there were a few languages spoken around in the community and a little bit out of the house, but at home that isn't really a conversation. We spoke English. At home, what is it you spoke? I mean, did you speak a mixture of languages as well from the beginning?
Yes and no. I don't. I think maybe sometimes people idealize like the polyglot household, but we really didn't have much of that. So we are an Afrikaans family, but I can't remember when I started learning English, but it's not my first language per se. My dad speaks French, and my mom has dabbled in Spanish. And because my family lived in Japan, we mix a bit of Japanese. So it's, I would say, mostly Afrikaans, but we throw in words from different languages. So one thing, I think I may have mentioned it at Polyglot Conference 2 years ago, was the word genki in Japanese. I don't know how you can really translate that to English. It's like good health, happiness, joy. Like it's just a state of well-being, genki. So my mom was quite ill for a while, and we wanted to encourage her. And she has this like such a sweet, deep connection to the Japanese language and culture. And one of her favorite words is genki. So every time she was, you know, getting her treatments, I would say, "Mom, you're so genki. You're doing so well." And this whole word of genki became this phrase that kept us going. So, and we do speak English and Afrikaans at home, but we mix in these words. Like before dinner, we'll say "itadakimasu" because you can't translate that. You can be like, "I will enjoy the meal," you know. But having these little aspects of different languages that you can bring into your life really makes your family feel different and special. And we also have our own family languages, like words we've made up. And I think maybe a lot of families do have that. You kind of create your own fun words and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you've integrated the outside or the other languages you've come across in your family. That's such a nice thing, and such a nice story as well with Genki, and lots of Genki for your dear mum for the future.
Thank you.
Um, I mean, you've also traveled quite a lot as well. So, I mean, sort of take me through sort of parts of your life and how the multilingualism has grown, because this is the thing that I noticed with you. You're adding to the multilingualism as you go as well, and you document it really well. And that's, I think, what everyone loves about you is just the pure, unadulterated honesty of how you document your language learning journey, whether it's Hungarian or Tagalog or whatever it is. Even the ones that you studied, for longer, like Korean and Japanese and Chinese, you really do document them. But let's sort of take it back from there. I think, so we talked about Afrikaans and the home languages. What came after that for you, and how did that change your sort of perception and your identity?
Language learning for the most part of my life, for the first half of my life, was just a means to an end. It was a school subject. It was, going to international schools. It was like, well, everyone speaks different languages. There's really nothing to it. I never really saw how much it can open doors and create connections and help you understand cultures and frame the way you think. So for the longest time, French at school was just, okay, I need to get good grades. So we memorize these vocabulary lists. And only after high school, after I started learning Korean and branching out to other languages like Japanese and Mandarin, after graduating school, I started becoming more interested in language study as a whole, and not just something as a means to an end. And like you said, I've been trying to document it, not only to track my own progress, but also to see how it can help me develop as a person in general. So recently, something I'm interested in is how to apply productivity principles to language learning, and also how to apply the agile working framework. So I work in a startup, and we work in an agile method, which is 2-week sprints, and then look back on what you've done and iterate upon there. So I like to now, I don't just approach language learning as learn a language. I see, like, how can this change me as a person, and how can the things I know in other aspects of my life help change my language learning. So it's grown from not just number of languages I want to learn, or friends I want to meet and talk to. It's more like, how can I integrate this into my life as a whole, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think, what, like you say, it's a very different way of looking at it from the school days, where you sort of a subject, and sort of you have to pass a grade, you have to get a passing grade, and then you move on to the next thing. A very different way of looking at things. And I mean, tell me, because I know Asia's been a big influence for you. How have you seen all of that, sort of the language, we talk about a very different way of using language as well, not just the language itself, but the culture as well in some of these countries. You've been talking about Japan, Korea, China. These are drastically different countries from your place of origin, and from each other, because I mean, China and Korea and Japan and the way they use the languages are also different. So how's all that worked out for you, and how do you now view that and the world differently through those lenses?
I would say languages open a door to new cultures, and you just can't separate culture and language. So within Japanese and Korean, at least, you have a lot of hierarchy, different levels of formality. And I guess French has that to some extent, a little bit in Afrikaans, but it's very pronounced in Korean, the way you respect your elders. If you don't know someone, you speak in a different way than you would to your friend or your younger sibling. And these are only things you can learn and view the world differently through once you learn a language. And along with culture comes like dialects. So something that I really enjoy is Singlish. So since moving to Singapore, I realized that Singlish is such a point of connection with my colleagues, particularly. And it's quite efficient and humorous. And just by throwing in a few Singlish words, not necessarily for show, like, hey, look, I can speak Singlish. It's like, English is so efficient. There's no other way I can express this feeling I want to express right now. And when you really tap into like dialects and aspects of culture, like Singlish, you can speak English and throw in Singlish words, but it's so different from South African English, American English, British English. You know, it's not just English that you're learning. So when I use Singlish at work, it's like I'm growing closer to my colleagues. We can even foster like better communication and collaboration because we've built another layer of being close to each other through this humor or this mutual connection. And when you speak a language, when you speak someone else's language, they look at you and they say, "Oh, wow, you've made an effort. This means you must be a versatile person, or you respect my culture." So I think getting back to what you just asked, like how what was your question?
No, I
How have
loved
Asian
hearing you talk
languages?
about To be honest, I got lost in your Singlish because
I got lost too.
I had friends from Singapore at university, and the only thing that I remember they used to say, "You're so funny, la," and that's what you used to say, which I thought was so cute. And I've been doing this Christang course for the last 10 weeks, and obviously it's based in Singapore with Kodra Kristang, and so good. And I can heartily recommend if you want to do it. It's a mixture of Portuguese and Malay, so I think it's an easy thing to pick up, but you're also supporting an endangered language. But slight aside, because you started talking about Singlish in Singapore and it reminded me of those wonderful memories. But yeah, I mean, my thought was, for you personally, how has it sort of refocused your view going through sort of the honorifics of Japanese and Korean and sort of and learning the Chinese characters and as you know, as sort of an extension of that kanji, how has that all sort of changed your view of things and sort of how you look at? Has it changed your world perspective? Is there something different that you feel now?
Lots to say about that. I think if you look at kanji in particular, or Chinese characters, they're if you look at the radicals, they're built from images. Like if you learn like really the basic characters, like the character for sun or stuff, you can see like what the image it came from, and it's quite a visual language. And you realize, oh, this is actually quite logical. And if you look at more complex characters and how they're built up with radicals, you realize, man, this is so different from my pouring old English or Afrikaans background. And there's so many different ways to view the same thing. So for one, it just made me more curious and realize that no one actually sees the world in the same way. And one of my goals for 2021 is coming to terms with the fact that life is not as black and white as I want it to be or I thought it to be. I really want to embrace gray areas this year. And you know, some languages have words that you just don't exist in other languages. Some things are taboo in one language that is so comfortable and open to talk about in other languages. And I think as part of self-development, respect, communication, learning to look at yourself and think, why do I think the way I do? How has my home language influenced the way I think? So if you learn another language, you start questioning, you're like, that makes sense, or that doesn't make sense. Why does it feel weird to me? So languages maybe has helped push me on a path of saying, well, life is not always right and wrong, yes and no. There's a lot of gray areas, and that's quite an intimidating but exciting space to be in.
Yeah, I mean, I totally know what you mean when you say that, and it sort of, things do change as you sort of develop and learn more languages and sort of learn origins of things. You learn how things interrelate. You learn about things that you just have no context in your sort of historical past, you know, in your family past, in your origins, I guess. And yeah, I mean, it's great to be able to incorporate them. Could you think of any sort of favorite things? I mean, I know you mentioned Genki, for example, from Japanese. Are there any other favorite things that you've taken from other languages and you just think, wow, how did I live without this before?
Oh my goodness, so many things. I think people who watch a lot of Korean dramas will know like all those little expressions like "아이고" or "깜짝이야," like those little, I don't know, like you could say in English like "ouch" or "oh my gosh," whatever, but it's like little fun things that just they come and sit in your brain and they come out subconsciously. Or there's another phrase in Japanese like "yosh," like I don't know how you can translate that to English. It's like, let's go, let's do this, come on. And it's like a sweet little yes, like it's just a feeling of encouragement that I really like. And sometimes bus drivers in Japan say it, like before they're ready to depart, they're like yosh, hashai tashimasu, yosh. And everyone has their like different way of saying yosh, but I like these little, what do you call them? Interjections, phrases, those things that I like to adopt from different languages. And the other thing which I like to mention often is uh, Chinese characters, and Korean is a lot faster and shorter to write. So I do write a lot of my notes, my meeting notes, and I just throw in a bunch of different languages. Not because it's cool or I can, but really it's much faster and much efficient. So I kind of create these little codes for myself. So ren in Chinese kind of looks like this. So it's just 2 lines, 2 strokes, and it means person. But I use it in my own notes for anything to represent people. So whether it's population or users at work, like the users I'm designing apps for, anytime I take notes, instead of writing people, population, users, buyers, I just write ren, and it just saves me time. So I guess that's also how I take fun things from different languages and make it work for me.
I love it. And I mean, I was saying before, you're actually still learning more languages, which is incredible because you I
Help!
mean, I know. I mean, I'm the same. So, I know the feeling. I know the struggle. Like resisting the new language is a very difficult thing to do.
Yeah.
But tell us about your new languages, because the latest editions are quite different. I think, aren't they?
Oh man. Mm-hmm. So Hungarian, man, Hungarian was something I started about 2 or 3 years ago and only kept going for maybe 3 months, and then priorities, and I jumped on Chinese again. And I've only recently, at the beginning of this year, gotten my motivation back to learn Hungarian, and it is so rewarding. It is just the most beautiful language. The grammar is unlike anything I've seen, maybe similar to Turkish. It's just so complex, and I like the challenge. And it's hard and it's humbling, because I realize, if you learn Korean and then you learn Japanese and Mandarin, there are some connections. The Sino-Korean words, or the Japanese and Korean grammar are similar. But when I learn something like Hungarian, which is unlike anything else I've learned, I'm like, man, I suck at this. This takes forever. I never remember the conjugations. What is like indirect and direct objects? Help. And it's humbling to realize, like, hey, I'm still teachable. I can see Aniko is laughing. Yes. But one of the most valuable and important like benefits of languages that I've come to learn is confidence. I used to be such a shy person. I remember, like, I was even when we went out with the family at lunchtime in the mall, I was too scared even to walk like 3 stores away from where my parents were. Like, when we were waiting for our meals to arrive, my brothers would be like, "Oh, we're bored. We're gonna go explore the mall." I would never do that. I was so scared to like venture from my tiny little what I knew, my parents or anything. I was a really timid child. And after learning languages, you're not going to really improve and make deep connections if you really don't step outside your comfort zone even just a little bit. And with doing that repeatedly, you grow in confidence. Not a cocky confidence like, look at all the languages I speak, but more like, hey, we're all human. We all make mistakes, and I'm enjoying the learning process. But you can also have a confidence as a beginner in your weakness. And that's what I'm realizing with Hungarian, is that when I take online lessons, my tutor is there to help me, and I should be confident in making mistakes and speaking, because I'm not going to get the corrections I need if I don't put myself out there a little bit.
Yeah, I know what you mean. You have to get out there and talk. And this is one of the things that people often ask with language learning generally is, how do I learn a language? And I say, well, if you don't do anything, you're not going to learn it. That's the only definite thing, right? When you talk about languages, because it's not going to go in through osmosis.
I wish life would be so easy if it were osmosis. I've seen some videos on YouTube, like, learn so-and-so language in your sleep. I'm like,
If only.
I would love to try.
You're also, I mean, there are so many facets to you, there's so many sides to you, like everyone else in the world, I guess, but there's a really creative side to you as well. How have languages really impacted that creativity?
even if I weren't a designer, even anyone else who doesn't consider themselves a creative person, by learning languages, you are fostering creativity. You need to have some sense of creativity to have new language learning techniques. And being creative also means stepping outside of your, oh, think outside the box. I mean, that's so cheesy, but that's really what you need to do in language learning. You can't just follow the same method for even the same language. Like how I learned French is completely different from how I learned Korean. So learning a language gives you opportunities to try problem solving. Like, okay, if this is a new language with a new script, I need to find a different method to learn this. Maybe I'll use an app. Maybe I'll write it out with muscle memory. Maybe I'll watch videos. There's much more different approaches you need to engage with in language learning. And I think I also touched on like iterative processes, and that's a part of creativity as well. Like looking back on what you've done and seeing what you can change. So problem solving and creativity helps you really find what works for you. And it's very common online to ask, well, what's the best way to learn a language? How does everyone else do it? But you actually need to try a few things and have a sense of creativity to take from different aspects and make that work for you.
Yeah, absolutely. There's certainly not a one-stop shop for everything that works for everybody. And I think that's one of the things that in the language learning community, I think we can pretty much all agree on. I mean, we've got our favorite techniques, right? And we've got things that don't work for us, but you watch other people and strangely they work for them. And Luca and I always used to joke and say, we learn languages in such different ways sometimes, but the outcome is very similar because you know, we both end up speaking the language, which is great. But some of the things he does, I think, oh, I couldn't imagine myself doing that. And I'm sure there are many things that I do that Luke is thinking, what on earth is he doing as well?
Likewise. I just had a chat with Luca the other day and I'm like, he's so disciplined, and just the way he structures his things, it's incredible, but I couldn't do that. And I think that's also the beauty in the language learning community, that we're not all doing exactly the same thing, but our goal, our mutual goal and endpoint is the same. Hopefully. Yeah. I don't know what else people would be, what sinister reasons you might want to learn a language, but I'm pretty sure we're all here to connect and learn.
Yeah, so drop your ideas in the comments to the kind of sinister things you can do with languages, and let's see what you can come up with. But yeah, I love the idea of sort of everyone just being so different, but also we've got this thing in common, and that's the commonality of this love of many, many languages. Dare I ask, have you got any language lists of things that you want, you know, languages you want to learn, cultures you want to explore coming up? Feel free to go completely crazy and let loose with like a huge list of languages.
Oh man, I think for now, when I was a bit younger, I used to have this very idealized view of polyglotism. Not that it was a race to like reach the most languages ever, but there was so much opportunity. But right now, I really feel like I'm at a stage of, I just want to improve what I currently know. So I met with my French friend this morning. We had breakfast and we were only speaking French. And I was like, man, I am so rusty. I can understand everything she's saying, and I'm so grateful for this language that I can communicate with her. But my French is rusty. So I think instead of adding any new languages, I really want to just reach a point of getting more comfortable in all the languages I know. Although there are some very tempting languages.
I knew you were holding back on me a little bit there, Lindie. I could tell. I can totally tell. Because I can recognize that in you, because I have the same thing, is you want to be sensible and say, oh no, I'm focusing on the languages I already have. But you know that if you go to a bookshop and you see a language that it's like a treasure trove, right?
It is. And, you know, there's not always a lot of resources, or at least in a bookshop, books available for every language out there. So when I see something that's super widely available, like Italian books, hello, Marcus, I was in Kinokuniya 2 hours ago and I was standing across the Italian book section. I'm like, there are so many books for Italian, might as well just learn it. I mean, I can't find any Hungarian books. There's like one Icelandic book, so maybe Italian. It's so tempting.
Well, I think Italian's probably calling you. I'm sure there are plenty of people.
Don't do that to me, Richard.
It's true though. I mean, you know, people do say, have you not finished, or are there any, which other language do you want to learn? And there's such a long list of things that I'd love to learn. And I can see that in your eyes when you're talking. You're almost convincing yourself, right, that, oh no, I shouldn't be thinking this, I shouldn't be doing this, but because you know you should focus, and you know that you have this magpie tendency. Oh, there's something shiny over there. Let me just.
Yeah.
It happens to us all, right?
Yeah, I did this. There's a test everyone can do online if they're interested. I think it's called the high five test, and it tells you your 5 strengths. And my number one strength is philomath, and that's basically someone who's just obsessed with learning. Like, I just want to learn all the things. And sometimes that's not the best thing because it's hard for me to really reach a level of mastery. But I love that people online in the language community are really embracing dabbling. I've seen a lot of conversations on Twitter going on like, hey, it's okay. Like, if I just want to learn a few words or listen to music or learn a few phrases and dabble in a language, why not?
Yeah, exactly. I absolutely agree. I don't think that it's necessarily the best thing to aim for perfection in everything, particularly for myself. And if it doesn't suit you, if it suits you, if that's your way, then that's also fine. It's just for me personally, and I think for people to sort of don that mantle of I have to get aim for perfection, to strive for this fluency, whatever fluency means to each individual. I don't know how helpful it can be sometimes, especially if you're just interested in something. If you want to figure out how Inuit works, you want to figure out how North Sami works, or how Kristang works, or any language you want in the world. There's definitely no shame in just having a little, dipping your toes in the water and seeing how it is. But yeah, I mean, I'm glad that we're all kindred spirits in this, and we all have. I mean, even someone like Luca, who sort of normally goes from sort of day one, and he's like for years just with this language for ages until he gets to this level that he's aiming for. Even with Luca, every now and again I see chinks of this, and then I want to do this, and then I want to do that, and then I want to do this, and then I want to do that. And you're like, you still have that too, Luca. I can see it. And I think it's healthy. I think it's good to have that curiosity. What do you think about curiosity and multilingualism? Do you think that makes it sort of bigger?
Sure. Oh, you have to be curious to really appreciate a language. I was giving a talk for a few diplomats, really serious politicians, and they had a language academy at the Department of Foreign Affairs in South Africa, and so many of the people just approached it as like, well, okay, I'm being sent to this country. I guess I have to learn this language, but I really don't care. Let me just complete my homework and be done. There was no cultural curiosity of like, I really want to know, why do people do this? Or, man, this food is amazing, I want to learn more about that. So yes, curiosity is a big beneficial skill that will help you learn a language. Language learning is not just techniques and methods and like the fastest way to learn this. It's a lot of principles. I have one video where I talk about like the 4 F's of language learning. It's fearlessness, fun, flexibility, and with that comes like curiosity and adaptability. There are a few like intangible skills that help you learn languages too.
Yeah, I'm so glad to sort of to end our part of the discussion on this note of this mutual adoration of loving everything different and everything we want to get to know and wanting to sort of find out more. And I think that curiosity really is something that multilingualism helps us celebrate, and helps to celebrate multilingualism itself. I think, what you said, your story, what you do online on a daily basis, all of this is a constant celebration of multilingualism. So thank you for all of that, and thank you for everything you do.
Thank you.
It means a lot to so many of us. And at this, I mean, are there any thoughts that you'd like to sort of share before we sort of wrap things up and go to the questions?
Nothing more in particular. I don't think anyone here will disagree with me or is at any point before this that I want to mention is like, only once you accept and acknowledge and realize really the deeper benefits that multilingualism can bring, connection, culture, creativity, flexibility. Only once you see those, then you can really reap the benefits of it. But I don't think anyone, at least in this panel, is at the point of not viewing languages in that way. So I'm really glad we share that in common. And thank you so much for hosting me.
Well, thank you very much for coming. Let's see if there are any questions. So if you have any questions, please do pop them into the chat and we will answer them. We have 15 minutes, well, 10, 15 minutes to be able to answer some questions, and we'll be very happy to do so. So please write your questions for Lindie. Yeah, it's been so nice to speak to you again. I mean, I just always enjoy these conversations, and I think this is the thing about the language learning community. When I was younger, we didn't have this idea of a community in the same way, because, well, first of all, there was no internet, so I was kind of the only person in the village or in my town where I grew up who even was into languages that I knew of. So it was a very sort of, yeah, so Richard, what do you think of languages? Yeah, well, I think they're lovely, Richard. What do you think? It's going to be talking to myself about languages. But and I had people say all sorts of crazy things to me. You know, my head would explode if I were to learn another language. What are you going to learn next? Serbo-Croat. That was one thing that someone said to me. I was like, oh my word. And I ended up learning it. So there we go.
Great.
Anyway,
I see a lot of questions coming in.
We do have questions coming in. So how do you manage to keep motivation to learn languages after you're tired after work?
Ooh, I don't always have boundless motivation. So that's when discipline comes in, but having flexibility within that discipline. So I used to be very, study this amount each day, finish this textbook, do all of these chapters. And I used to plan it out. And I realized I'm not even sticking to my own plans. So that's why I rather give myself more flexibility. And then at the end of the week, I review and see what was working and what's not. And I don't want to get into too much biology or psychology, but as a female, we have hormonal cycles that severely affect our productivity and mood. And I realized at certain points in the month, I actually feel more energized to learn languages. And at other points in the month, I feel more reflective, like, okay, look back on what's working, reconsider my resources and textbooks. So understanding yourself and your energy levels and how you feel throughout a month or a day also helps you to realize when are ideal times to study. But again, language learning is not just about studying. You don't have to sit in front of your desk. You really need to get out there, talk to people, get immersion, get enough listening practice. So seeing where you can incorporate that into your day. And even in the workday, if you have opportunities to incorporate languages. So sometimes I do my research in a different language. If I'm researching a new project, I might look for an article in another language. Just small ways to incorporate languages into my life also helps.
Thank you. There's a question about the language learning community, and apparently I've answered a little bit of this, but what would you think about language development of the language learning community? The development of the language learning community. So how is it going? Which way do you think it's going?
What do we think about the development of the community? I see like us as a broader language learning community online, but there are some subgroups in it. You have like the fans of Anki, and then you have the like people who follow a very specific method of immersion. Then you have the dabblers, and then you have the, Korean, Japanese, Chinese club. Like also, for some reason that always goes together. And then you have, I think we all have different branches or subcultures in the language community, and within those we seem to be developing. I actually took a few notes on that. Let me just see. I was saying that just give me 1 second to find my notes. Yes, I wrote, within polyglot community online, we find a sense of belonging. Humans just want to belong and feel part of something. No one likes isolation. Yeah, basically what I'm saying is that people kind of form their own little communities online because we want to feel a part of something. And once we found someone who has something in common with us, we're going to start growing smaller communities out there. I don't know, Richard, what are your thoughts on the development of the broader community?
Yeah, I think that so there's what you're talking about, the aspect of different pockets of language interest and people who are sort of fans, like this fandom type thing of certain
Yeah.
apps or websites or courses or methods. That definitely exists. I think there's an overarching umbrella. The thing that I'm interested in watching right now is the integration of Clubhouse and TikTok into the community more, because there is sort of a budding community on TikTok. It's a little bit all over the place at the moment still. I'm following TikTok very avidly really at the moment because I'm just enjoying seeing how the worlds are slowly merging. I'm not quite there yet to take the plunge myself because it's still a lot of funny dances and stuff, but there are definitely some very interesting channels out there. And I was speaking to someone actually just the other day called Laurie Knox, who teaches about English, teaches English language. But he comes up with really good stuff that's not just for foreigners learning English or people learning it as a second language, but also for there are things that are interesting for people who speak English a first language level. And I think also you see people teaching one language like English or another language, and there are some real worlds starting to meet there. And I just wonder where on how far that's going to go.
It's just a quick note. It's interesting that you mentioned Clubhouse, and one of the ways I think our language learning community is moving towards is community in the sense of the word and accountability. I think people have moved past the idea of there's one YouTuber or one author who tells you how to do it and then you follow that. People are looking for connection, community, and accountability. Like, hey, we're all still exploring this. Let's do it together. How are you doing? And study groups online. There's like a few Instagram groups where you join on a Google Hangouts or a Zoom call to study together. So I think people are really looking for connection and accountability, especially now that we're all remote and digital, virtual.
Absolutely. On Clubhouse, so I'm on Clubhouse now, and
Lucky, I'm Android.
But you have to get an iPhone just for Clubhouse, obviously. But I mean, it will come out. I think they're planning on rolling it out to more devices. But the cool thing about Clubhouse is I set up the Polyglot Conference Clubhouse as well. And I do regular chats on there as well with different language learners, some who are not on in other parts of our community and are bigger on Clubhouse. And also I have a Korean study group. So this great group of people, we meet 5 times a week to study Korean.
Amazing.
It's absolutely amazing. I wrote an entire blog on it on my not to sort of promote myself, but I wrote a blog about this and about Clubhouse on my Speaking Fluently website. And I've just found it absolutely brilliant for language learning. So seeing how that moves further forward is quite exciting, I think.
Yeah, very cool.
So a slight change of tack here. Tim was asking about Xhosa and Zulu, and sort of, were you exposed to those much, or have you looked at them?
Yeah, thanks, Tim, for the question. So I didn't grow up in South Africa for a long enough time to really have the opportunity to learn it at school and such. It was only more in university where I met people who spoke Xhosa or Zulu or Sutu, actually. And I picked up a few words here and there, but resources are also not limited, but quite outdated and hard to find. So to answer your question, I was exposed to it a little bit, but never really took it on. No.
Okay, we've got 2 more questions, and I think we'll start wrapping it up then. The next question is about how do you manage to learn a new language and keep the other ones going as well, sort of doing all these languages in parallel?
For me, I like to do language stacking, but I know people like Luca will disagree with me and say that that's not the best way. So language stacking is when I use one language that I know at least to an intermediate level and use it as the means of instruction for the other language. I'm looking around because I'm wondering if I have my book here. Okay, it's over there. It's a Japanese book called Spengo no Nikki, or I don't know. It's a Japanese book for how to write diary entries in Spanish. So it's to teach you Spanish, but it's written in Japanese. So by doing that, I am kind of keeping Japanese alive as the language of instruction while I am learning Spanish. Now, that might not work for everyone, especially if you haven't reached an intermediate level in all your languages. So I think everyone has different methods, but at least for me, I try and do language stacking.
Okay, so I know I am sort of guilty of doing that kind of thing too. Sometimes there's no choice. Actually, you only have, for some languages, you have better materials or just more materials through a different language.
Yeah, I mean, historically it might make sense, but the best Vietnamese resources I found are French, like Assimil, and you can barely find really good English resources for Vietnamese. So good point you have.
Okay, and the next question, I think this is probably going to be our last question. If you could go for an entire year to anywhere in the world for a year-long immersion in a language, where would you go and which language would you learn?
Can you guess? I'll give you two guesses. It's one I'm learning now. I think you might.
I'm going to guess you'd go to the Philippines and it'd be Tagalog.
No, Hungarian. It's so hard. I've actually researched it and considered it. Like once a month, I'll Google like intense immersive summer program to learn Hungarian or something. Like man, Hungarian is hard, and I'm sure a year of immersion in Hungary would be so useful.
I think it probably would. I think this is the thing. A year of complete immersion would be amazing. I don't know what I'd pick. I think I'd pick something where I would be very unlikely to really kickstart the language well. Otherwise, because sometimes languages are so distant, and until you really break into the community, it can be quite challenging to really get into it. And there are so many that are going through my head right now. It's unbelievable. But yeah, I mean, I always had this fascination with Georgian, and I started learning it many years ago at university in Sweden, and it just felt, I'm not going to say impenetrable, but it was a challenge, especially with no one speaking it around me. And I felt exactly what you're saying with Hungarian for you. I felt it a little bit. You feel like you want the context, and you want to hear it all the time so that you can really get into the language. And so possibly I'd like to go back to Georgian and
so cool.
do it. Although pretty much any country and I'll be happy, and any language I'll be happy. So it's almost like the child in the sweet shop, right?
Oh yeah. How are you supposed to choose? Yeah.
Exactly. They're all sweet and they're all good. So yeah, what do you do? Lindie, it has been an absolute pleasure speaking to you, and thank you to everyone for your questions as well. Thank you for joining us for this chat. It's all recorded, so we're going to be putting it on YouTube. And thank you so much. Thank you for making the time.
This is the last thing from my side. I actually just realized that people have been putting questions in the actual Q&A box and not the chat. So apologies from my side for not even seeing the questions in the Q&A versus the chat. But again, you're more than welcome to reach out to me on Twitter or Instagram or a YouTube comment, and I will reply to your questions on social media. So sorry for missing.
Oh dear, I'm sorry as well.
Thanks for having me.
I until you said that, I didn't even notice it at all.
Me neither. Well, technical difficulties, it's the first session.
Okay. So. We'll get to them at some point. We will maybe have to come back and have another chat together, Lindie, and just to tackle these questions.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
All right. Take care, everyone, and see you for the next session. Bye-bye.